أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه العبد المؤيد والرسول المسدد، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المنتجبين. من كلام لسيدنا ومولانا الإمام أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صلوات الله وسلامه عليه أنه قال: معاشر الناس، إن النساء نواقص العقول، نواقص الحظوظ، نواقص الإيمان. أما نقصان إيمانهن فقعودهن من الصلاة والصيام في حيضهن، وأما نقصان عقولهن فشهادة امرأتين منهن كشهادة الرجل الواحد، وأما نقصان حظوظهن فمواريثهن على الأنصاف من ميراث الرجال. فاتقوا شرار النساء وكونوا من خيارهن على حذر، ولا تطيعوهن في معروف لكي لا يطمعوا في منكر. Last night, for the brothers and sisters that were with us, we discussed the topic of misogyny, and that Islam has been accused of being a misogynistic faith and religion, promoting hatred and disrespect towards women. Yesterday we examined several verses in the Holy Quran that might be presumed of encouraging misogyny. We examined the verse, الرجال قوامون على النساء. And we looked at several other verses in the Holy Quran. Tonight, I'd like to direct your attention to another very important source of Islamic theology and Islamic ideology, and that is Nahjul Balagha. Some accuse Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam of having statements that are derogatory, demeaning, disrespectful of women. Is this true or is this not true? First of all, let me give a couple of premises and then go into our argument. وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Let's state a couple of facts in the beginning. Men and women, are they intellectually the same, or are men superior when it comes to the intellect? There is absolutely no proof that men are superior in their intellect than women. Proof of this is that look at women across the globe. Wherever men have reached, women have reached. If men have reached the best universities, so have women. If men have carried the best PhDs, so have women. If men have become doctors and engineers and scientists, so have women. That is proof that women are not inferior when it comes to the intellect. Their intellect is not less than a man's. If men have become political leaders, so have women. This is a reality. This is a fact. We've seen this. We could see this. We could sense this. That women are now no less, when it comes to intellect, they're not any less than men. In fact, the Quran testifies to this. The Quran tells us about a woman, of a queen, the queen of Saba in Yemen, who was wise, but did not worship Allah. Sulaiman alayhi salam, he قال ما لي أفقد الطير. He saw his bird missing. So he asked, they told him, he's missing. When he came, he told him, where have you been? He said, I've come from Saba. جئتك من سبأ بنبأ عظيم. I've come from Saba. What have you seen in Saba? He said, I saw a group of people that are being ruled and governed by a woman. Ajib. A woman, yes, a woman. And she has a strong army. She has a strong country with a strong economy. But the problem is they don't worship Allah. They don't worship God. Sulaiman alayhi salam sent her a message. He sent her a letter. And she told her people, she read the letter to her people. But I've received a letter. إنه من سليمان وإنه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أن لا تعلوا علي وأتوني مسلمين. Do not become arrogant and surrender to me. What did this queen, Bilqis, what did she do? What did she do? She asked her army. She asked the commanders of her army that, what do you suggest? What do you think we should do? This, number one, is a sign of intellect. This is a sign of wisdom when you're not a dictator. When you're facing an imminent threat of an invasion, you're facing a threat of being toppled from government, yet you ask your advisors, you ask your commanders, what do you think? You see, this is not a dictatorship. This is wisdom. When you ask for counsel, when you ask for people's opinions and advice, this is wisdom. And there's so many narrations. We have narrations from Amir al-Mu'mineen and others that encourage us to seek advice, seek counsel. Whatever you do, you go to university, you'd like to major in something, you like to get a job, you like to get married, you're into spouse selection, you're choosing a spouse, seek counsel, seek advice. This is not, some people think if I seek advice, I seem weak. No, you don't seem weak. On the contrary, when you seek advice, this is more power to you. This shows that you're a wise person. Bilqis asked, what do you say? What do you think we should do? They told her, listen, the choice is yours. If you want to fight, we'll fight. We have a strong army. We have the best army. And if you want to fight, we'll put up a fight. You don't want to fight, we won't fight. What did she say? Another sign of her wisdom. What was her reaction? She said, إِنَّ الْمُلُوكَ إِذَا دَخَلُوا قَرْيَةً أَفْسَدُوهَا وَجَعَلُوا أَعِزَّةَ أَهْلِهَا أَذِلَّةً وَكَذَلِكَ يَفْعَلُونَ. She said, if a king enters a city, he ruins that city. And he turns all the respected and loyal and honorable and royal people in that city into what? Into slaves. And this is what will happen. She was smart. She was wise. She wasn't arrogant. She didn't say, well, you know what? We have an army. We could topple Sulaiman. If he has an army, we have an army. As they say, bring it on. Let him bring his army. She could have done this, but she didn't. And then Sulaiman brings her throne to his palace, and she comes and she sees the throne. قالت إني آمنت مع سليمان. She becomes a Muslim. The Quran gives us an example of a female figure that was wise, that was intellectual, that knew how to rule. In fact, if there were 10 other men, 100 other men in her place, they might have been arrogant, they might have went to war, they might have brought destruction upon themselves and upon their country. But this wise woman didn't. Now keep this in mind. Having said this, let's come to Nahjul Balagha, and let's come to the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen كلام الأمير أمير الكلام. The words of Amir al-Mu'mineen are the best of words. Let's see, what does he say regarding women in Nahjul Balagha? And is it truly him? Is it? Are these his words or not? He says, معاشر الناس, O people, إن النساء نواقص العقول. Women, O people, women are deficient in faith, نواقص الإيمان, in faith. نواقص الحظوظ, deficient in shares. ونواقص العقول, deficient in intellect. And then he goes on to tell us why are they deficient. He says, أما نقصان عقولهن فشهادة امرأتين منهن كشهادة الرجل الواحد. As for their deficiency in intellect and brain and logic, is because the testimony of two females is equivalent to testimony of one male. وأما نقصان حظوظهن, as for their deficiency in shares, فمواريثهن على الأنصاف من مواريث الرجال. That is because their share of inheritance is half of that of women. وأما نقصان إيمانهن فلقعودهن عن الصلاة والصيام في أيام حيضهن. And as for their deficiency in faith, is because they don't pray and they don't fast during the days of their menstrual cycle. So their faith is less than that of men. And then he goes on and he says, فَاتَّقُوا شِرَارَ النِّسَاءِ, beware of the evil of men. I see some men smiling. I don't know why. You shouldn't be smiling because you will see the answer to this sermon. So beware of the evil of women. وَكُونُوا مِنْ خِيَارِهِنَّ عَلَى حَذَرٍ. And for the good ones of women, be aware of them, be careful of them. Don't be fooled by them. وَلَا تُطِيعُوهُنَّ فِي مَعْرُوفٍ. And if they tell you to do something good, don't do it. Don't do it. Why? لِكَيْ لَا يَطْمَعُوا فِي مُنْكَرٍ. So that they might not desire of you to do bad. When they tell you to do good, don't do it. Because if you do it, they'll desire bad from you. This is a sermon number 80 in Nahjul Balagha, attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Some will come out and say, and indeed there are some Western academics that come out and plainly said Ali ibn Abi Talib is a misogynist. Ali ibn Abi Talib is a person who hates and disrespects women. Why? Because of sermon 80 in Nahjul Balagha. Now, what are the reactions of our scholars and ulama towards this sermon in Nahjul Balagha? Did they accept it? Did they not accept it? Did they reject it? Did they say it was forged? What were the reactions to this sermon? There are several reactions. One, and probably this is the most popular reaction. From the time of Al-Sharif Al-Radi, who gathered Nahjul Balagha and compiled the narrations and short sayings and letters and correspondences of Amir al-Mu'mineen, up till 60 years ago, the reaction to this sermon was of acceptance. It was accepted. No one objected. No one questioned this sermon. No one said, well, why did Amir al-Mu'mineen say this? Why is Amir al-Mu'mineen saying, إِنَّ النِّسَاءَ نَوَاقِصُ الْعُقُولِ? No, it was accepted. In fact, some even went, like Muhammad Abdu, who has a commentary on Nahjul Balagha. Muhammad Abdu was a scholar in Al-Azhar in Egypt. He has a commentary on Nahjul Balagha called Sharh Nahjul Balagha in one volume. He says the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen, in fact, experience testifies to the truthfulness of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Meaning that history proves that Ali ibn Abi Talib was right when he says women are deficient in faith, in intellect, and in shares. He's right. So this is one reaction. Up till 60 years ago, no one objected to this narration. No one objected to this sermon. Everyone accepted it. We don't have any historical evidence of any scholar, any alim, Sunni or Shi'i, from Najaf or from Azhar, from Qom or from Karbala or from anywhere else that objected to this sermon up till 60 years ago. So the first reaction was of acceptance. No one objected. The second reaction is that some began to analyze. They said, well, wait, hold on a second. Amir al-Mu'min is saying, النساء نواقص العقول, نواقص الإيمان, نواقص الحظوظ. Who is he talking about? Is it possible that Amir al-Mu'mineen is talking about all women throughout history? From his time and before his time and up till our time? Women are all deficient in intellect? Is it possible? That's not possible. Amir al-Mu'mineen is definitely not talking about this. Why? He's not talking about all women. Because it's a proven fact that there are women that are not deficient in intellect. In fact, some of them, or many of them, their intellect is not less than men, if it's not more. For some. Can we say that men are stronger in intellect than women? No, we can't. And we can't say that women are stronger in intellect. At least we could say they're the same. So what is happening here? What is Amir al-Mu'mineen talking about? Some said, well, let's read the context. When was this sermon delivered? Sermon number 80 of Amir al-Mu'mineen that begins معاشر الناس إن النساء نواقص الإيمان نواقص الحظوظ نواقص العقول. When was this sermon delivered? And where? It was delivered in the city of Basra after the battle of Jamal. After the battle of Camel. Do I need to give you any more hints of who Amir al-Mu'mineen was talking about in the sermon? Some scholars came out and said it's clear that Amir al-Mu'mineen is not generalizing. He doesn't mean all women. But there's a specific woman. There's a specific woman who led a battle against the Imam of her time and who caused the death of 40,000 Muslims. He's talking about her. A woman came, one day a normal woman came and visited this specific woman, the wife of Rasulullah. She told her, what do you think of a mother that kills one of her sons? She said she goes to hellfire. She said, what do you think of a mother that kills two of her sons? She said she goes to hellfire. 3, hellfire. 4, hellfire. She said, what do you think of a mother that kills 40,000 of her sons? She said, get out, get out. She knew what she was talking about. Personally, I usually don't give opinions, but personally, I think that this is the correct opinion. Amir al-Mu'mineen was not addressing all women. He was addressing a specific woman at his time that caused havoc and caused a fitna during her period. And this was not an ordinary woman. They claim, خُذُوا ثُلْثَ دِينَكُمْ عَنْ فُلَانَ. Take a third of your faith and religion from this lady. And there's fatwas and narrations. You open Sahih al-Bukhari and you will find hundreds of narrations from this individual. When Amir al-Mu'mineen was saying this, he knew what he was doing. He was targeting an individual that was wreaking havoc and causing fitna. So the context says that Amir al-Mu'mineen is speaking about a specific individual. And in fact, and this is my personal opinion, is that any narration, most of the narrations that you will find in our books, in Al-Kafi, and in other books that address the evil of women, and that women are evil, women are so and so, there's a narration. Al-mar'atu sharrun kulluha. A woman is pure evil. وَشَرُّ مَا فِيهَا أَنَّهُ لَا بُدَّ مِنْهَا. And the worst part about a woman is that you need her. Hold on a second. How does this work? How does this fit with my Islam, with my Quran? How can this fit with the Imams that I know? The only logical explanation that I could accept is that they're speaking about a specific woman. Yes, that specific woman is pure evil. المرأة شر كلها. That makes sense. وشر ما فيها أنه لا بد منها. That makes sense. This is a specific woman that we're talking about. But to say all women, our mothers, our daughters, our sisters are pure evil, this doesn't make sense. That's what we have to contextualize. And I believe that this sermon was delivered regarding a specific woman. So this is a second reaction. And there are several scholars that have come out and said Amir al-Mu'mineen is speaking about a specific woman. إن النساء نواقص العقول نواقص الإيمان. Yes. If she had faith, she wouldn't wage a war against the Imam of her time. If she had strong Iman, she would not wage a war against Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. So there's a specific woman being targeted. This is a second reaction. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. A third reaction says, hold on a second. We believe that any hadith, any sermon, any narration that has reached us from the Ahlul Bayt, from Rasulullah, from the Imams, number one, we have to see, is it compatible with the Quran or is it not compatible with the Quran? The Ahlul Bayt themselves told us, ما وافق كتاب الله فخذوه وما خالف كتاب الله فاضربوه فاضربوه أرض الجدار. Any hadith, any narration that we find it being incompatible with the Quran, contradicting the Quran, put away with it. Put away with that hadith. And we have lots of traditions, lots of narrations that we've neglected because of their incompatibility with the Quran. More than this, as Shaheed As-Sayyid Muhammad Baqir Al-Sadr, he has a theory. And As-Sayyid Al-Sistani, Hafidhullah, he agrees with him. These two scholars, they have a theory in Usul al-Fiqh, in legal theory. They believe that a hadith does not necessarily need to contradict a specific verse in the Quran. Sometimes a hadith contradicts a specific verse in the Quran. Obviously, you reject that hadith. No. Sometimes the hadith contradicts the spirit of the Quran. يخالف روح القرآن. You might not find a specific verse that contradicts this hadith, but this hadith contradicts the spirit of the Quran that we know, that we grew up with. You reject it. Sayyid Muhammad Baqir Al-Sadr rahmatullah alayhi, he gives an example. He says there's a hadith that is degrading towards Kurds, al-Akrad. There's a hadith that say al-Akrad qawmun min al-jinn. He says this hadith cannot be accepted, has to be rejected. Why? Because it conflicts with the spirit of the Quran. It contradicts with the ruh al-Quran. Hence, we reject this hadith. Of course, personally, I disagree regarding this hadith. Why? Because it's misunderstood. Al-Akrad qawmun min al-jinn. It doesn't mean the jinn that we know. No. Jinn, the word jinn comes from darkness. فَلَمَّا جَنَّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّيْلِ. Jannah, when darkness covers. Why do we call jinn jinn? Because we can't see them. Because they're in darkness, we can't see them. Why do we call an insane person majnoon? Because he has an absence of mind. His mind, you can't see his mind. You can't see his intellect. Jinn comes from darkness, comes from absence. That's the root word. Thus you have majnoon, jinn, janna alayhi al-layl. Kurds, where do they live? In mountains. Their areas are mountainous. They hide in their mountains. You don't see them. They're absent. Thus, al-akrad qawmun min al-jinn. If this is the meaning, this is not derogatory, this is not disrespectful. Anyhow, the point is, any narration, any hadith, any sermon that conflicts with the spirit of the Quran, ruh al-Quran, has to be rejected. Come to the sermon. The sermon that says, An-Nisa nawaqis al-uqul, nawaqis al-iman. Is this compatible with the Quran? The Quran that says, Inna akramakum inda Allahi atqakum. The best of you are those that are pious, not men and not women. Anyone who's pious. The Quran that says, "Man amila salihan minkum min dhakarin aw untha falanuhyiyannahu hayatan tayyibah." He who does good deeds, whether from men or from women, we shall give them a pleasant life. Anyone who knows the spirit of the Quran, Ruh al-Quran, will say that this sermon is incompatible, to say the least. It is incompatible with the Quran, and hence cannot be accepted. This is a third reaction. A fourth reaction says that we have to read the sermon contextually. We have to contextualize the sermon. Read it based on history, in its context. Put it in its context. Don't take it out of its context. Amir al-Mu'mineen is not addressing all women till the day of judgment. No, he's addressing women at a specific time, at a specific place. And this is also something important today in ijtihad. Unsur az-zaman wal-makan. Reading certain laws and certain narrations based on time and place. Based on time and place. There are certain narrations, certain laws that were issued at a specific time, at a specific place, and that were not meant to be at all times and at all places. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Amir al-Mu'mineen was asked towards the end of his life, why don't you dye your beard? Don't we have narrations from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He was asked, didn't Rasulullah dye his beard and encourage his companions to dye their beard? Isn't this sunnah? A tradition of Rasulullah? Amir al-Mu'mineen said, no. This was at a time when Muslims were outnumbered. Muslims, some of them were elderly. They had long white beards. And the enemies would look at them and feel that this army is weak. It's full of old people. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted his army to look what? Young. He wanted them to look young. Because you want to fear. You want your enemy to fear you. To look at your army and be fearful. He said this was the reason. At that time. Today, Muslims are big in numbers. We have huge numbers today. Place. وَلَا تُطِيعُوهُنَّ فِي مَعْرُوفٍ لِكَيْ لَا يَطْمَعُوا فِي مُنْكَرٍ. When was he saying النِّسَاء نَوَاقِصُ الْعُقُولِ? When? At a time when women were uneducated. They did not go to school. They did not read and write. They were married at a young age. They were uneducated. He was looking at a specific time, at a specific time frame, at a specific place in Arabia when women were taken advantage of. They had no rights. They were commodities. They would be inherited. Did you know this? Before Islam, a son would inherit his father's slave, female slave. She was his father's slave. Now she becomes his son's. This was nonsense. During the days of Jahiliyyah, he was saying this at this time when women were behind. Not at a time when women have an education and have become equal to men and have reached places where men have reached and have picked up jobs that men have picked up, and so on and so forth. So he's speaking at a specific time frame to a specific audience, and he didn't mean at all times. This is another reading. This is another opinion. This is another reaction to the sermon. Another reaction, a Rijali reaction. A Rijali reading of the narration. We'll say, hold on a second. Let's check the chain of narrators. Does this sermon have a legitimate chain of narrators, or is it weak? When we come to the chain of narrators, we see that it doesn't even have an isnad. It doesn't even have a sanad. Al-Sharif al-Radi put this narration, and he doesn't even say how this narration reached him, how this sermon reached him. So according to Rijali principles, a Rijali reading of the narration, it's a weak narration. It's a weak sermon. Khabar da'if. Because it doesn't have a legitimate chain of narrators, isnad. So if we were to look at the sermon from a Rijali perspective, it lacks authenticity because of its Chain of narrators. Another reaction, another way of analyzing the sermon is that to say, hold on a second. Amir al-Mu'mineen is putting off women. It's putting them down. Women are deficient in faith, in intellect, in shares. Be aware of them. Be aware of the evil woman. And of the good ones, be aware of them. فَاتَّقُوا شِرَارَ النِّسَاءِ وَكُونُوا عَلَى خِيَارِهِنَّ مِنْ حَذَرٍ. Even the good ones, be aware of them. Be careful. Be careful of good women. Even the good ones. Would Amir al-Mu'mineen say this? Amir al-Mu'mineen, and this sermon seems to have, you would say, that he's showing anger and animosity towards women. Is this befitting of the character of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen? Hold on. When we look at the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen and how he treated his woman, how did he treat Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam? He was the best of husbands. Is there any instance or an incident where Amir al-Mu'mineen disrespected Fatima al-Zahra? Never. He was a father to 4 daughters. Is there any instant or an incident in which Amir al-Mu'mineen beat any of his daughters or verbally attack any of his daughters or hurt them or disrespect them? None. Amir al-Mu'mineen had a mother, Fatima bint Asad. Did he ever disrespect her? There's no incident. Thus, some will come out and say that this sermon is not befitting of Amir al-Mu'mineen's character, of his history, of his life history. Someone who had nothing but respect and love and honor towards his wife, towards his daughters, towards his mother, towards all of them women in his life. How can he say such a word? How can he say such a sermon? Amir al-Mu'mineen towards Fatima al-Zahra, he would never call her by her name. He would always call her Yabnata Rasulillah, Ya Binta Rasulillah. He would never address her by her name. And same goes for Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. She would never address him by his first name, Ya Ali. Never. Yabn al-Am. She would always call him my cousin. And look at husbands and wives today. I wish they would only call themselves by their first names. No, sometimes they curse at each other in front of their children. No respect for one another. Today, newlyweds and family members have to learn from the respect that Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima al-Zahra had for one another. Believe me, when a husband and wife argue and fight and curse one another in front of their children will never forget. Never forget. That view of their parents fighting, it will never disappear from their minds. And it will affect their marriage life when they grow older. When they grow older. Thus, when we compare this sermon to the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen and his teachings and the way he behaved with the woman in his life, we say that doesn't fit. The sermon doesn't fit with his character. Doesn't fit with his character. طيب. Another analysis would say that Amir al-Mu'mineen is known for his eloquence. Amir al-Mu'mineen was known for his eloquence. All of his sermons, all of his narrations, all of his sayings were eloquent. Look at Nahjul Balagha. Nahjul Balagha, from the beginning till the end, it's a masterpiece. An intellectual, grammatical masterpiece. When it comes to its eloquence, nothing can come near. It comes right after the Quran. The Quran is number 1 in its eloquence. Number 2, Nahjul Balagha. But when you read the sermon, it doesn't fit with all the other sermons. It doesn't go together with all the other sermons. All the other sermons are full of eloquence, but not this one. See, when Amir al-Mu'mineen says, An-nisa nawaqisul iman, women are deficient in faith. Why? He tells us the reason. Or it's ascribed to him. He tells us the reason. Why? Because during their days of menstrual cycle, during their days of menstruation, they do not pray and they do not fast. Does this make sense? First of all, they don't fast in their days of menstruation. But once it's over, do they fast or they do not fast? Do they make up their fasting or they do not make up their fasting? They make up their fasting. And sometimes that's even harder for them. Because during the days of Ramadan, when everyone is fasting, the blessings of Ramadan, they have to break their fast. And they have to make it up at a different time. Fasting more. When it comes to salah, them not praying during their days of menstruation, is this a lack of faith? This is how Allah created them. Biologically, physiologically, Allah created women this way. And then He comes and says they lack faith because of their biological, physiological way of being created by Allah. It doesn't make sense. Allah made them this way. And then He makes them lack or deficient in faith. It doesn't work that way. That doesn't make sense. That can't be logical. As for نواقص العقول, they are deficient in intellect. Why? لأن فشهادة اثنتين منهن كشهادة الرجل الواحد. The testimony of two women is equivalent to the testimony of one. We addressed this last night. For those that were with us last night, we addressed this. We said this has nothing to do with deficiencies in intellect. No, it's a matter of memory. We remember the things that pertain to us. Whatever is important to you, you'll never forget it. Will you ever forget your birthday? You'll never forget your birthday. Will you ever forget your email address? Will you ever forget where you were born? You won't. There are certain things that you'll never forget. Correct? Why? The things that are important to us, we'll never forget. Things that are not important to us, we tend to forget sometimes. That's why you might forget your wife's birthday, because it's not that important to you. By the way, if you want to remember your wife's birthday, forget it only once. You'll make sure you'll never forget it again, because of what you'll face. You'll forget the things that are not important to you, the things that you don't deal with every day, but you'll remember the things that are important to you. Yesterday we talked about this verse. فَإِن لَمْ يَكُونَا رَجُلَيْنِ فَرَجُلٌ وَامْرَأَتَيْنِ. Why? This verse is talking about monetary issues, financial issues. And we mentioned last night, at the time of revelation, who dealt with money? It was men, not women. It was men that were businessmen, that went into business, not women. Of course, it was rare. It happened, but it was rare. Like Sayyidah Khadija alayhi salam. Sayyidah Khadija was a businesswoman, but this was rare. Usually those who went into business were men, not women. They dealt with money. They dealt with finances, not women. So if a woman were to be a witness over a business transaction, was it 1,500 dinars or 2,500 dinars? She might forget. Why? Because she doesn't deal with money, she might forget. أن تضل إحداهما فتذكر إحداهما الأخرى. If one of them forgets, the other reminds her. So it's an issue of memory. It's not an issue of intellect. It's not that women are intellectually deficient. No, it's a matter of memory and that which matters to you the most. For men, there are some things that they'll forget. If it's not important to them, they'll forget it. That is why when a wife tells her husband she went to a wedding or she went to a majlis, and then she comes home and she tells her husband that this and this happened and that happened, and then the next day she tells him one of the details of what happened at the wedding, and he'll tell her, when did this happen? It's because he doesn't remember. Why? Because it's not something important to him. What happened in that wedding, it might be important to the wife, but it's not important to the husband. He'll forget it. Does that mean that he has a bad memory? No, your husband doesn't have a bad memory. It means he wasn't paying attention, or he doesn't remember the things that are not important to him. So why would Amir al-Mu'mineen say this? Nawaqis al-uqul, because the testimony of two women are equivalent to the testimony of one man. That has nothing to do with intellect. That has nothing to do with logic. It has everything to do with memory. And there's one final analysis. Of course, there's others. There might be various readings, but I'll mention one final one. وَصَلُّوا عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدٍ. This final interpretation says that Amir al-Mu'mineen, this sermon that is ascribed to him, and we don't even know, did he say it, did he not say it? He's talking about what? معاشر الناس إن النساء نواقص العقول نواقص الحظوظ نواقص الإيمان. And then he goes on to explain why. He talks about their shares of inheritance and their testimonies. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, when she came after the martyrdom of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih, she asked for fadak. And we all know that fadak was what to Fatima al-Zahra? What was it for her? Inheritance. It was inheritance. طيب. What was her proof? What was Fatima al-Zahra? Whose witnesses? Who witnessed? Who gave their testimonies for Fatima al-Zahra? That fadak was an inheritance from Rasulullah to Fatima al-Zahra. Who? Ayman, a woman, a female. And Al-Hasan and Hussein, who were children. Some say, there are some that believe this sermon was forged. It was attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen to underscore whom? His wife, Fatima al-Zahra, for her claim to fadak. What is the best way to underscore Fatima al-Zahra's claim to fadak as inheritance other than ascribing a sermon to Amir al-Mu'mineen saying النساء نواقص الإيمان النساء نواقص الحظوظ النساء نواقص العقول. Underscore her through the tongue of her husband. Damage her and attack her through the tongue of whom? Her husband, Amir al-Mu'mineen. It makes sense. This is possible. Again, this reading is very much possible. Because Fatima al-Zahra came and asked for fadak. What was fadak, my dear friends? Fadak was a land from the Anfal. It was from the spoils of war that Rasulullah owned, personally owned. Rasulullah had never given Khadija alayhi salam her dowry. Why? Because he didn't have money. He didn't have money. But when he received fadak as an anfal, as spoils of war for Rasulullah, the verse was revealed, وَآتِ ذَا الْقُرْبَى حَقَّهُ وَآتِ ذَا الْقُرْبَى حَقَّهُ. Give your kin, your family members, the right. Mufassirin say that this verse was addressing Fatima al-Zahra. Since Rasulullah was not able to give Khadija her dowry, who is the heir to Khadija? Fatima al-Zahra. He couldn't give it to Khadija, but he could give it to whom? Fatima al-Zahra. Give her dowry. Give Khadija her dowry. Hence Rasulullah gave fadak to Fatima al-Zahra as a compensation for Khadija's dowry. Because when Khadija died, Rasulullah did not own a single dinar. A single dinar. He gave fadak as a compensation to Fatima al-Zahra. طيب. Rasulullah passed away 10 days after the departure, the demise of Rasulullah. Fadak was taken away. Or less, or maybe less than 10 days. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam comes in the middle of the masjid, in front of men. They say women can't speak. In front of men. Fatima al-Zahra, instead of all men, of course observing all hijab. Observing hijab to the point that they could not see her face. Observing hijab. Yet she gave a powerful speech. Known as khutbat fadak. طيب. One of the excuses that the authorities provided, one of the excuses that Abu Bakr provided was that Rasulullah did not give you fadak. He did not give you fadak. Rasulullah died and fadak was his, and now that he died, fadak goes to all Muslims. It doesn't belong to you. Fatima al-Zahra brought Ayman. And she brought Al-Hasan and Hussein to bear witness that Rasulullah gave her fadak. They told her, Ayman is one female. And one female, her testimony is irrelevant. Bring 2 male witnesses and we'll give you fadak. But you brought one female witnesses. You brought 1 female witness. She said, okay, I have Al-Hassan wal-Hussein. They said they're children. Al-Hassan wal-Hussein. Sayyida shababi ahli al-Jannah. Rasulullah said this in his life in front of all the Sahaba. They said, no, they're children. She said, okay. You fail to acknowledge that fadak was given to me. Okay. There's another way. Rasulullah, this is his inheritance. My inheritance from Rasulullah. If you fail to acknowledge that fadak was given to me as a gift, khalas, it belonged to Rasulullah. Rasulullah died and I am his only heir. I am his only heir. Thus, fadak is now my inheritance. He said, no. No, prophets do not leave inheritance. Because I heard, Abu Bakr said, I heard Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam state, نحن معاشر الأنبياء لا نورث ما تركناه صدقة. We prophets do not leave inheritance. Whatever we leave behind is sadaqah, is charity. Ajib. Ajib. Prophets do not leave inheritance. The Quran itself says, وَوَرِثَ سُلَيْمَانُ دَاوُودَ. Prophet Sulaiman inherited Dawood. Zakaria alayhi salam. And the Quran, Zakaria did not have children. He did not have sons. He asked Allah for a son. يَرِثُنِي وَيَرِثُ مِنْ آلِ يَعْقُوب. Grant me a son that will inherit me and inherit my forefathers. طيب. Prophets don't leave inheritance. The Quran testifies that prophets leave inheritance. Zakaria is saying, oh Allah, grant me a son that will inherit me. Sulaiman inherited his father Dawood. How is this possible? نحن معاشر الأنبياء لا نورث ما تركناه صدقة. So they rejected Ayman. And they rejected the testimony of Al-Hassan wal-Hussein. And they rejected the issue of inheritance. This is how they treated the only daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The only daughter. If Jesus had a daughter, they would place this daughter on their heads. If Musa had left a daughter, they would place this daughter on their heads. Yeah, look at this treacherous ummah. Rasulullah left one daughter, and this is how they treated her. They took away her fadak, they attacked her home, they broke her ribs, they aborted her fetus. All of this, and the Quran says, قُلْ مَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْآنِ. All I ask is that you show love to my family members. Rasulullah is telling them, show love to my family members, and they did this. Imagine if the Quran did not say, قُلْ مَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. What would they have done? In fact, if Rasulullah had told his companions, listen, I want, after I die, I want you to destroy my family members. I want you to massacre my family members. Could they have done anything worse than they already did? Could they have done anything worse? The 2 men came to Amir al-Mu'mineen. It was Fatima al-Zahra's final days. They told him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, ista'dhin lana Fatima. Ask Fatima, we'd like to come and see her. Why? We'd like to come and seek forgiveness from her. Amir al-Mu'mineen came to Fatima al-Zahra. He told her, the 2 men want to come and see you. Do you give permission? She said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, this is your house. How can I tell you not to bring someone into your house? This is your house. However, do not ask me to speak to them, nor be pleased with them, because by God, I will never be pleased with them. لن أرضى عنهما أبدا. Amir al-Mu'mineen tells him, you can come. If you'd like to see Fatima al-Zahra, come and see her. They came. The elder, he said, Ya Fatima, you don't doubt that I love you more than my own daughter, Aisha. I love you more than her. And God knows that the day that your father died, I wished I had died in his place. Fatima al-Zahra, they came and they said salam. When they entered, they said salam. Fatima al-Zahra did not answer the salam. She did not say wa alaikum salam. She turned her face the other way. They came and faced her again. She turned her face another way. Twice or three times, she kept on turning her face away from them. Finally, Fatima al-Zahra asked Amir al-Mu'mineen. She said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, I have a question for them. She didn't even speak to them directly. She didn't speak to them or address them directly. She spoke to Amir al-Mu'mineen. She told him, Ya Ali, I have a question for them. If they answer me, I might speak to them. If they answer me truthfully, I might speak to them. Tell them, أما سمع أبي يقول إن الله يرضى لرضا فاطمة ويغضب لغضبها. Did they not hear my father say, Allah is pleased to the pleasure of Fatima and is angered to the anger of Fatima? قال بلى. She said, فليشهدا إني لن أرضى عنهما أبدا وسأدعو عليهما بعد كل صلاة أصليها. Let them bear witness that I will never be pleased with them and I will curse them after every salah that I will pray. فجعل الأول بالويل والثبور. Began crying and weeping. You're saddened at the I'm astonished at Muslims how they made you their Khalifa and you cry because of a woman. And they left. On that sad day of her demise, Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she asked Asma to take Al-Hasan and Hussein out of the house. She said, I have private words with my cousin Ali ibn Abi Talib. Asma took Al-Hasan and Hussein out of the house. Amir al-Mu'mineen had sensitive words to say to Amir al-Mu'mineen. العام إذا قضيت نحبي فغسلني وكفني فإني طاهرة مطهرة لحنوط أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وصل علي وليصلي معك الأدنى فالأدنى. And pray over my body and only let the close members of my family to pray over my body. الأدنى فالأدنى من أهل بيتي وادفني بالليل إذا نامت العيون وهجعت الأصوات, and bury me in the middle of the night when all eyes have gone asleep. واعف موضع قبري, and hide my grave. ولا تجهد جنازتي أحدا ممن ظلمني, and don't let my oppressors see my janazah, see my dead body. يا ابن العم وتزوج من بعدي أمامة, and marry after me Umama. واجعل لها يوما وليلة واجعل لولدي يوما وليلة. My cousin, spend one night and day with your wife Umama, and another night and day with my sons Al-Hasan wal-Hussein. ولا تصرخ في وجههما, and don't shout in their faces. فيصبحان يتيمين غريبين, today they will become orphans. فإنهما بالأمس فقدا جدهما واليوم يفقدان. فإنهما بالأمس فقدا جدهما واليوم يفقدان أمهما. Yesterday they lost their grandfather, and today they lose their mother. ويلي حين حضرتها المنية حضر عدها الوصي وقت الوصية، يقل لها تقلي لي اشتهيسين مرتي كبدتي يوم حسن وحسين، تقلب وقت غسلي يا ابو الحسنين اريد اللي تشوف عليها تصبر، تراني طاهرة ولو غسلتني لا تجيس ضلعي ومتني، أخاف يذوب قلبك لو شفتني، خل ثوبي علي لي توخر، خل ثوبي علي لا يا توخر. Amir al-Mu'mineen left the house. That morning, Asma bint Umays, she said, I came and I saw Fatima. I told her, Sayyidati, today you look well. You look in a better shape. She said, Ya Asma, this is the final day in my life, and today I will depart you. Ya Asma, when my sons Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein come into the house, give them their food first. Allow them to eat, because if they discover sad news, they will no longer eat. Asma says, I left Fatima in the courtyard of the house, and I would hear her remembering Allah, Subhanallah, La ilaha illallah, Wallahu Akbar. All of a sudden, Fatima's voice became faint. All of a sudden, she stopped speaking. I went to her, Sayyidati ya Fatima. She did not answer. Sayyidati ya Fatima, ajibini. She did not answer. She said, I went and I saw that Fatima had departed from this life. I threw myself on her. She said, أبلغي أبيك مني السلام وعليك مني السلام. All of a sudden, Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein walked into the house. As soon as they walked, Al-Hassan said, Ya Asma, أين أمنا Fatima? I said, Bunay, waladay, kulu ta'am. Come and eat your food. He said, Ya Asma, أين أمنا Fatima? Again, I said, Kula ta'amakuma ya Sayyiday. Al-Hassan said, Ya Asma, mata ra'aytina na'kul at-ta'am min ghayri ummina Fatima? When have you seen us eat our food without our mother Fatima? It was here that Al-Hassan realized what was happening. He came out to the courtyard and he saw a dead body covered with a cloth. He came to his mother, Ummah ya Fatima. His young brother Al-Hussein followed in his footsteps. They came to the dead body. Al-Hassan again, Ummah ya Fatima, kallimini qabla an tanfajra mararati fa'amut. My mother Fatima, speak to me before I die and I fall. As for Al-Hussein, he stood, he didn't know what to do. His older brother realized that his mother had departed. Yet Al-Hussein did not know what to do. The narration says that he came to the feet of his mother Fatima. He brushed her feet against his cheeks, and he said, Ummah, kallimini fa ana waladuk al-Hussein. This was one day where Al-Hussein would sit and mourn the corpse of his mother Fatima. And there was another day where Fatima al-Zahra would come and mourn the corpse of her son Hossein. أنا الوالدة والقلب لهفان ودور عزبني وين ما كان. أنا الوالدة يا حسين يا ابني، يا ريت ذباحك ذبحني. وين اللي يواسيني بدمعته على ابن الذي حزه ورقبته. وظلت 3 أيام جثته ويلاه على ابن ما حضرته وما غسلت جسمه ودفنته وما غسلت جسمه ودفنته. أفاطم لو خلت الحسين مجدلا وقد مات عطشانا بشط فراتي. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العلي الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. عندنا مرضى أيها الأعزة. There are several people that have asked us for dua. Their eyes are on this majlis. Some have cancer, some have deadly illnesses. They want your du'as. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا عيبا إلا سترته ولا خوفا إلا آمنته ولا رزقا إلا بسطته ولا شملا إلا جمعته ولا مرضا إلا شفيته ولا غائبا إلا حفظته وأدنيته ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة لك فيها رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها ويسرتها يا أرحم الراحمين. ولأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والعلماء والشهداء نقرأ سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على